Hi, everybody. Well, good morning where I am. I'm talking to you from Oakland, California. Good afternoon or evening, I believe, where you are. Uh, I actually attended, I think, the very first UX Sophia back in like 2008. And so when Jimmy asked me if I would uh, uh, join, I was hopeful that I could make it there in person. Life gets in the way. So I am sharing with you from my home. And I, because of the timing, I wasn't able to listen to all of the presentations, but I did hear from the last couple and a lot of talk on AI, and it was very intellectual. That's not what my talk is going to be about. This is a very basic talk. It is meant to provide a set of clear takeaways, things that you can do going back to the office on Monday to start getting your teams, your design organizations more effective. So yes, the title of my talk is From Team Design to Design Ops, the top 5 things to boost your design organization's effectiveness. If you don't know this about me, among other things, I co-wrote a book called Org Design for Design Organizations. And I do a lot of work helping companies figure out how to make their design orgs as effective as possible. And so this is like trying to glean from all of that stuff that I've done. What are 5 nuggets that I think are likely the most impactful? And what I'm talking about is relevant to anybody who is taking, a team that might be 5, 6, or 7 designers and expanding that just a little bit into where you have 10, 11, 12. So maybe you have 2 teams. That's this liminal point where you become a design organization. So going from a team to an org. When you become an org, you need to introduce a set of practices that enable that scaling to occur and maintain effectiveness. The first thing you need to do with any team is to define it with a charter. I've written, and there will be URLs throughout my talk. I've written a blog post on creating a charter. So the material that you see me sharing, there's a blog post. That blog post links to a Google Doc that has an agenda for like how you could lead your team through these types of exercises that I'm about to talk about. The thing to remember is that teams are defined by their purpose, by this charter. A team without a charter, a team without a purpose is just a group of people doing some work. It's the purpose that galvanizes them into a team with a goal, with a mission, with a reason for being. And typically, a design organization within a company, their initial charter, their initial identity was defined by non-designers. The CEO, a head of product, someone else was like, we need design. They hire a designer. That designer builds up a team. But that initial act was done by a non-designer. And what I find is I often come into organizations where the designers realize they need to take the reins of their own identity. And when that happens, I help them think through that with creating a charter. There's a few essential elements to a charter. The first is you have to be clear on your mission. Why does this team exist? What is its purpose? You need to be able to answer that question. So, for example, I did some work for a newspaper based in the United States, their product design team. And this is what we landed on in terms of that highest order mission. The product design team champions all readers through crafting engaging, enriching, and enduring experiences. And I drew it in this like shield to say that they're the champion, they're kind of the protectors of the readers, but they're also, at this intersection with the business that needs to make money and the writers, the creators who are creating the journalism that the people are reading. But whatever it is for you, you need to be very clear on why your team exists. Once you've defined the purpose, uh, you then want to understand what are the values that this group of people uphold. And as this says here, particularly in the face of challenges, right? It's easy to have values when everything's going easy, but when times are tough, as they've been for the last year and a half here in our industry, are you still holding on to those values? That's what defines them. So for a different organization, when I led them through a values exercise, this is what we landed on. A set of 4 values that the design team felt really defined what it is they cared about. Curiosity, approachability, making it easy to work with them. Kaizen, which is this concept from Japanese, like lean manufacturing of continuous improvement, right? So the design team wanted to always be getting better. And then empathy, or being empathetic, right? That quality of really attending to the needs of others and dialing into that and being mindful of where others are at. So you have mission, you have values, then norms. Norms are behaviors, and how you show up, how you do your work, how you engage with one another. And they should be kind of built on those values. The norms I'm about to show are not specific to any design org. Instead, I'm wanting to share a couple of kind of industry standard norms that have emerged that often come up when I do this work. On the left-hand side, that is a diagram from a work that Google did called Project Aristotle, where they were researching what makes any team effective. And side note, when they did that work, their hypothesis is that the most effective teams would be the teams with the highest performers on it, the rock stars. What they found was that's not true. What they found was that far and away, the most important quality of an effective team is this concept of psychological safety. As it says, team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. That if you make a mistake, that if you try things and it doesn't work out, excuse me, that if you challenge one another, including people who are your boss, you will not, there won't be any retribution. You will not be punished. You will not have anything done to you, right? That's psychological safety. And teams with that quality are far more effective than others because they're always trying things. And when they fail, they just move on and it's no big deal. And that allows them to get to the best solutions. On the right-hand side is a 2x2 from Kim Scott, the author of a book called Radical Candor. And in that 2x2, this is another norm that I hear more and more teams trying to embrace, which is that of radical candor, being able to engage one another honestly, directly, but with care in order to make the work better. We in UX and design tend towards ruinous empathy. We have that empathy kind of quotient, and we bring a lot of care. And because of that, we're often not willing to challenge because that might make someone feel bad. And so, but then the work doesn't get better. That person's, they don't grow in their craft. And so, figuring out how teams can move into that radical candor quadrant is often part of the something the charters help teams kind of realize they want to embrace. And then the last thing, and there's more to it when you read that blog post around charters, there's more to it, but the last thing I'll be sharing here is just you have to be super clear on what success is. How do you know that the team has succeeded, right? When we think about sports, we know what success is. Success is a win. It's harder for us. We have to come up with our own understanding of what success looks like, and so that we know that we're doing the right things. And so when I work with design organizations, I often come up with something that looks like this. The health of the team is always a measure of success. By health, I mean, how is morale? How is attrition? Is it a healthy org? And you want to be able to measure that. And so things like morale improvement, right? You can measure morale through internal surveys, that kind of thing. Oftentimes the teams I'm working with are looking to exert more influence throughout their broader organization. And so that often becomes a measure of success that we're driving towards. Quality matters, but one of the challenges with many of the organizations I support is they want to deliver quality, but they have no means to measure quality. And so the first thing they need to do is establish some type of UX metrics framework, such as the HEART framework. And then many organizations have design systems, and so the adoption of that design system becomes a metric. These ones, things like this often come up with the teams I'm working with. You might have others as you reflect on what it is that means that your team is successful. This, though, could be a good place for you to start. Oftentimes, so these ones are like evergreen, the ones on the left. Every year, you'll have those top-level categories. The specifics might change. But I then also find that working with teams, there's usually some special OKR for that year. And so in this case, I was supporting a team where the designers worked on their own, but by and large, or worked, they worked in isolation of one another and only with their product peers, their product and engineering peers. And so the idea here was, how do we get designers to collaborate more? And again, we were going to measure it and see how we're doing. So a charter, thing number one, in order to get your design organization more effective. Thing number two, centralize and elevate design. When I talk about centralizing design, it's because at the heart of what we're doing, what design is working on, is this reality that I'm sharing here, which is how everything is or is becoming a service, right? Cars are a service now that you have rideshare services like Lyft and Uber. Exercise equipment is a service thanks to Peloton. I don't have to buy Blu-rays anymore because I subscribe to movie streaming services such as the Criterion Channel. I can turn a room into my house into a service thanks to Airbnb. And as I mentioned, I wrote a book. A book is a product, but O'Reilly, if you go to O'Reilly.com, you wouldn't know that they published books, right? Because O'Reilly has realized that the value is not in the book, but in a service that they call a learning platform. So all these companies are moving everything towards this service model. And what that means, when people engage with the service, they're engaging in a very complex multi-channel, omni-channel kind of experience. There's offline and online components, lots of different people and systems that they're engaging in. And the reality is that service relationship is spanning multiple teams within a company, right? Marketing, product, customer support, sales, merchandising, whatever those various kind of teams are within your company, they all have some relationship to the customer. And from the point of view of the customer, though, they're just seeing this as one service relationship. And so they're not looking at it, siloed the way that we tend to organize. And so we need to remind ourselves that all of this design work that we're doing, whether it's marketing design, product design, design for service and support, is all really just service design. It's different elements of an overarching service design. And so the organizational implication of that is, that I argue for, is you want to have a single head of design. You need to have someone responsible for the function. I just spent 2 days working with a company here in the United States that has no head of design. They have 4 or 5 design directors who report into different product leaders. And it's introducing all kinds of challenges for them in terms of defining the role, defining process, developing career ladders, for design to be heard, have a voice at the highest levels. So you want to have a single head of design, and ideally that head of design overseeing the entirety of design within that organization: product design, marketing design, design ops, kind of supporting both of those teams. Because, as we said, that way that head of design can help make sure that that end-to-end service experience is hanging together. You want that head of design to be no more than 2 levels from the CEO, or in a truly scaled organization, maybe like a GM, but they need to have access to the senior most executives in their organization, peers with people like the head of product, head of engineering, et cetera. And that head of design needs to have autonomy to do what they determine is necessary in their org. They can't, that SVP or the other heads can't just tell that head of design how to structure their organization, how to run their organization. They need to have the freedom to do what they believe to be best for their organization on behalf of the company. So that's the second thing, is centralizing and elevating design. Third thing, how do you shape this design organization? Design your organization with intention. Don't simply respond to how other people are organizing their teams and mirroring that. Think about what makes the most sense for your organization. So it is pretty common for design organizations to adopt the same organizational model of however products are organized, right? So here we have, from an e-commerce example, a long time ago, I worked at Groupon.com. And we had teams for search and browse and product page and shopping cart, et cetera. And it's pretty typical when you have teams like that to embed designers into those organizations. So you have 2 designers working on this and 1 designer working on that, et cetera. But I would argue, instead of organizing design by products, what I do is I like to organize by customers. So Groupon was a marketplace. So we had 2 customer types. We had buyers, people shopping, who were having their end-to-end experience. And so have a team dedicated to delivering on that end-to-end experience across those product areas. And then similarly, we had the merchants offering the deals. And so have a team delivering on that merchant or seller experience across those products. So instead of embedding a designer, say over here, you see this that says make an appointment, right? The old model would say, let's put 2 designers in here. The problem with that is those 2 designers, if all they're looking at is make an appointment, they don't know the journey that the buyers and sellers have been on before they arrive at this kind of part of the experience and where they're headed to. And so they might do a good job designing that thing in isolation, but it won't hang together as part of a whole, right? Whereas if you have, for this make an appointment, a designer here working on the buyer aspect of it, a designer here working on the seller aspect of it. Now, excuse me, but these folks are also aware of the journeys that those people have been on. Now it can be made a part of that user's end-to-end experience. I've been talking about this kind of thing for a long time, for about a decade now, since I was working at Groupon. And what I've found interesting is it's not just design people saying this now. What you see here is Melissa Perry. She's the author of a book called The Build Trap, or Escaping the Build Trap, sorry, a fellow O'Reilly author. And in her book, she has this statement: first, you begin with whomever is consuming your product at the end of the day. What is the value you are providing them? Then work backward. What are the touch points they have with your company on the way to receiving that value? Having identified those, how do you organize to optimize and streamline that journey for them? So she's saying not just for designers, but think about organizing your product organization with that customer lens, as opposed to what we usually do, which is either kind of products in isolation of one another, or code bases, platforms. We have the iOS team, the Android team, and the web team. Instead, organized by how your customers are engaging with your product or service. It is early in the morning, so I still need some of my coffee. My bias as a design leader and now as a design, kind of organization consultant, I bias towards putting the customer at the center of my organizational designs, right? If everything is becoming a service, and so what we are delivering are these end-to-end experiences, I think it's most important that to put the customer at the center of that, to make sure that they are having a coherent end-to-end experience, recognizing that that might sacrifice speed of development, right? A lot of organizations are interested in just pushing stuff out as fast as possible. I think that's foolish. I think it's foolish because we often just ship a lot of stuff that no one wants. And we're able to check boxes that we shipped a thing, but we're not actually having an impact. I would argue you don't want speed of development, you want speed to impact. And when you reframe it like that, you'll find that simply shipping for shipping's sake doesn't deliver impact, but being intentional will. Now, I bias towards putting customers at the center. You need to figure out what you should optimize for. Organization design is always a matter of managing trade-offs. There is no perfect organization design. And customer centricity for your organization might not be what's best for you. But as long as you are intentional, apply some thinking about how you're organizing, I trust that you will be better off than if you, again, simply just respond to what everybody else is doing because that's what they're doing. Thing 4, structure design around design teams. So I left Adaptive Path. I was one of the founders of a user experience firm called Adaptive Path. That's in fact where I was working when I visited UX Sophia 15 some years ago. I left Adaptive Path in 2011 and went in-house in 2012. And in 2012, these 2 presentations were published that year. The one on the left talks about DevOps at Amazon and kind of introduced, I think, the world to the idea of the 2 pizza team, right? There should be no team that's larger than can be fed by 2 pizzas. And those teams should be complete, full ownership, full accountability, right? Everything embedded in that team. The same year, the Scaling Agile at Spotify was published by Henrik Knieberg, and I forget Iverson's first name, but talking about how they were looking at how do they scale Spotify's Agile organization. And that's where we get the language around squads and tribes. But it's a very similar, right? That idea that every squad is another kind of way of thinking about a 2 pizza team. And so as this was kind of where things were at in 2012, when I went in-house in 2012, this is the kind of thing I saw when I went to Groupon and supported other places. You would have a set of feature teams with a designer working with the product manager and some number of engineers, and you did have some leadership over here. And it definitely has some advantages for designers to be working within an embedded organization. Because the designer is a member of the team, they're not just there to make it pretty. And they're not like part of an internal agency that's brought in for just a couple of weeks to make it pretty and then move on. They're a member of the team. So they're involved throughout the life cycle of that product. And that gives them the feeling of ownership, pride. And when something launches, they're still there to follow through on quick iterations, as opposed to, say, a more internal services or agency model where a designer is given to the team for 2 or 3 weeks during a design phase, and then they leave, the team launches the work, and if they need to iterate, they have to wait to get the designer back, right? So there's benefits of embedding a designer. But I've seen again and again that it leads to a set of issues over time. That designer's working on a narrow problem for a long period of time. The designer feels lonely because they're the only design person around in the group that they're primarily engaging with. They don't know how they can grow in their organization because they're so kind of removed from other designers and a design, kind of development that they just are doing the same thing week in, week out, month in, month out. It's not clear how to grow. The designer is often paired with a product person who's more senior to them, and that means that they often just are told what to do. It's hard for them to engage as partners. the user experience is siloed, as I was saying before, right? And you have these distinct product teams, everyone solving the problem in isolation. And so when you bring it together, it's not the experience isn't coherent. It doesn't flow. And there are times when you don't need as much design as others, and times when you need even more design than others. But because you just have one embedded designer, that's all you get. And so it's not an efficient use of time and people. And so, and by having a single embedded designer in a team, we're now asking a lot of that designer, right? Because designing software takes a lot of different skills and talents and abilities. And so if you want to be doing great design, you're asking this individual to be great at all of these things, which nobody is. And so this is a model optimized for engineering. Engineering gets to operate in teams. And haste. How do we just pump stuff out as fast as possible? And I would ask, what if we were to optimize for user experience? Much of my career since leaving consulting, adaptive path consulting, I'm now doing a different kind of consulting, has been trying to figure out how to bring the relevant aspects of an environment dedicated to quality design into corporate context. What do I mean by that? If you look at design firms, such as Adaptive Path, whose sole purpose is to deliver high quality design work, design always happens in teams. It's always 3, 4, 5 people working together. It doesn't happen with one designer in isolation of others. And so instead of having embedded designers, what if you were to take those designers, pull them up and out, and turn them into a team? And some of the changes that occur, you have this design lead is not just leadership, but is also overseeing one of the feature teams. You have these S's or senior designers who own the relationship with product managers and are able to be seen as peers and partners. More junior designers are able to float where they are needed. Because as I said earlier, right, some of these teams will need more design effort at different periods in their cycle. And so you can use these more junior designers almost as load balancing to place designers where they're needed at a particular time. And then you can also introduce more specialized skills like content strategy into the team, right? When you're embedded, it's really hard to get content strategy, user research, certain other specialized skills into those teams. But when you think of design as a team, that's much more, you make it easier to make that happen. There was a blog post written by Director of Design Nicole Burrow about an experience she had that I think is relevant to this conversation. When she joined an organization, and this was the seating arrangement when she joined. It was basically manifesting squads. You had a designer with a group of engineers and a product manager, a designer, a group of engineers, and a product manager. And so she just did this, and this is pre-pandemic, she did this very simple rearranging where she said, you know what, yes, designers, you're still part of those squads, but I'm going to have you sit next to each other so you can help one another, so you can look at one another's work, and so that we can kind of communicate to one another what we're doing and try to create some, not just community, but coherence across the different products that these folks are building. The punchline of this is that Nicole Burrow wrote this experience about being a director of design at Spotify, right? The company that popularized squads. There's a whole separate thread that many of you probably know, which is that Spotify never actually went as all in on squads and tribes as people thought they did. And so, it was a model that they considered. They tried it. They did things, but they evolved beyond it pretty quickly. But because it was written about, it got kind of taken up by others as this gospel that even Spotify didn't necessarily practice. That's a separate story. There are a number, I already mentioned some of these. There's a number of benefits when you have design working in teams as opposed to in isolation. Designers don't get overwhelmed with delivery expectations, right? You don't have one designer having to do 8 or 9 things really well. You can allow different designers within your team to have different strengths and weaknesses that you lean into. Designers don't get stuck on the same thing forever. They're working across a broader palette of opportunity. You can have a broader spread of skills brought to bear, so the work is better. The product that you're producing is better because you can have some designers that are strong in information architecture, and some designers that are strong in visual design, and some designers that are strong in content design, other aspects. You have that more holistic view of an end-to-end experience. The designers are able to learn from one another, right? Instead of being isolated, now they're part of a team, so they just get those different opportunities to learn from one another. And as such, those designers are supported in their career, their development, day to day. So the last thing to share with you is, as you're building out this org and as the org is growing, around 15, 16 people in your design org is when you want to establish design operations. And I could do a whole talk just on design operations. I just have this one slide. Because design operations is important, because running a design org is much more than leading design practice. There's a whole host of organizational factors that need to be taken into account. And so typically when you embrace design operations, it's initially for these things, program and kind of business operations. So program management is where you have a design program manager who is helping the designers coordinate with product and engineering and others and get the work out the door. It's not a delivery function specifically, but it supports delivery, coordination, communication with other teams, all that kind of stuff. The business operations is a little more kind of behind the scenes within the design org, where you might be doing things like headcount, tools and services, facilities, figuring out staffing, separate from recruiting and hiring, or like if you need agencies and contractors. But either way, you have a set of activities here that you can bring on a design ops person to do, all in the interest, and this is being a little silly, there is no word in English called effectiver, but all in the interest of making your designers more effective. And so that's typically where it starts. If you're scaling a design organization, or you have a design organization of 30, 40, 50 people, you start needing design operations folks who are dedicated to people operations. And essentially this fourth line here, employee experience, recruiting, defining roles, creating an environment where people want to stick around, the employee experience, leveling and career pathing, how you handle performance review, making sure people are paid well, developing your kind of reputation as a place to work. All those types of things. And all of that is in the interest of making your designers happier. That's the measure of their success is designer engagement, morale, those types of things. And then as you scale again, I work with some orgs. I work with orgs that have 800 people in them. Pretty uncommon, but happening more and more. As you get beyond 150, 200 people, it makes sense to start having design operations folks who are focused on the practice, on helping your designers be better at their work. And so supporting their professional development, skills building, training and education, documentation of work and process, helping train one another, hosting internal events where these things can come together. Now, all of these things actually, even in a 20-person organization, all of these things matter. You just might have one person doing them all. But as your organization scales, you can start having people focused on these different aspects. So here are 5 things to think about as you're looking to make your design organization more effective. Define your org with the charter. You need to have that purpose that defines the team. Take the reins of your identity. You want to centralize and elevate design so that it's close to those executives so that you can have that broad impact, and by centralizing so that you can oversee that end-to-end experience. And then shaping your org with that intention, organizing by journey or whatever you decide makes most sense for you. And then within that, having, instead of individual embedded designers, teams of designers working together on the problems that they're solving. And then to support all of this as you scale, establishing design operations. And with that, I thank you.